day has descended into the night, and the Rangers are at the base checking Apollo while he is lying on a sofa there in a weakened state. Even though the Rangers have gained a new power, they have still failed to find the Rhinozord, and Apollo's life is slipping away from him. Can the Rangers save him and find the Rhinozord?
Jackson says,
Apollo, are you okay?
and Apollo then answers,
Jackson, I'm not doing too well.
Jackson then says to Maxwell.
I hope she nurses him back to health, Dad.
Maxwell replies,
I hope so too, son.
and he and Jackson then walk into the main room where the Rangers are sitting, and he says,
Son, I called one of the best people I know. I called my doctor friend Sadie from New Tech City. She's used to dealing with extraordinary patients like our friend.
Grace replies,
She must have superpowers. That sector is miles away.
Maxwell laughs and Jackson walks in and says,
Dad, do you think he will be okay?
Maxwell replies,
Son, I couldn't tell you, but looking at the injuries, and plus the fact that he gave you his essence, I would say he's in critical condition, but let's hope that somehow, some way, Sadie can help him.
The base's alarm goes off and, on the screen, in the main room, Pit is seen eating up the sides of buildings downtown. Lion says,
We forgot about him. Let's go break both his hands.
Alexa then cracks her knuckles and replies,
Now you're speaking my language.
The five arrive downtown and see Pit. Jackson rebuttals,
Don't you know gluttony's a sin?
I don't even know what sin is, but I do know what I am having for lunch today. Razor promised I could eat these buildings, humans, and vehicles.
The Rangers then hear a rumbling and Reezer walks up. The Rangers look shocked and Becky rebuttals,
I thought Jackson beat you.
and Razor says,
I must admit, he did derail me. But it doesn't matter, because I'll always keep coming back.
Jackson says,
Dad was right about making him so durable.
Reezer then says,
Perhaps another time, Red Ranger. For now, I've completed my mission. I suggest you use this time to prepare yourselves for the coming battles, lest you become another meal for Pit.
Jackson exclaims,
It's only done until I say so.
Reezer then pulls out his dagger and waves a beam at Jackson as he's escaping the portal. The impact causes Jackson to fall. The others then help Jackson up. Becky then says,
You'll get him next time, Jax.
and Alexa adds,
Yeah, we have more important matters to attend to now.
Lion rebuttals,
Aww, I wanted to see them clash again.
Colby then points at Pit and says,
Look! He's walking towards more buildings!
Pit exclaims,
Let's see what is next to snack on.
and runs towards more buildings. Jackson then says,
The only thing you're going to munch on is our fist.
all five pull out their digital prisms and instamorph. The five then charge at Pit and hit him with a barrage of kicks and punches. As the fighting is intensifying, Pit then jumps back and retorts,
Power Rangers are tougher than I thought. I'm not going to try to fight you. I'm going to eat more buildings and more humans.
Pit then jumps away and starts eating a building full of people, and Jackson asks,
Where do you think you're going?
and then Alexa says,
I hear a child crying nearby.
The five then power down and go pull the shrapnel of a building up and find a mom cradled around her son Jackson recognizes. The kid says,
Look, Mom, it's Sensei Jackson.
Jackson then says,
David and Mrs. Smith, we're here to help.
Jackson and the four then take the two of them to the hospital. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Jackson commands,
You guys go after Pit. I'll stay and check on them.
Alexa and the others then say all right. Colby, Alexa, Lion, and Becky head out towards the city and find Pit with Pixels standing beside him. The four instamorph and fight the Pixels. The four then summon their weapons and take on the Pixels. Minutes later at the hospital, one of the doctors walks towards the waiting room and proclaims to Jackson she will be okay, it was just a minor leg sprain. She should be back on her feet in a couple of weeks. Afterwards, Jackson walks back in Ms. Hernandez's room and she says, "Thank you, Jackson, I appreciate everything you and your friends did." David then says,
Sensei Jackson, you're the best.
Jackson retorts,
I tried to be. Little man, you stay and look after your mom for me.
David then rebuttals,
I'll do what I can, Sensei.
Downtown, the four are still fighting the Pixels and Pit. As the four are taking the Pixels out with their main weapons, the four then charge toward Pit with their weapons, but Pit reaches out his hands and attaches their mouths to the Rangers' main weapons and consumes them. Pit then commands,
Pixels, blast them!
And the blasts then knock the four back and powers them down. On the ground, Alexa says,
We've got to get our weapons back!
And Colby adds,
We've gotta hurry before he digests them!
Lion exclaims,
All this talk reminds me that I skipped breakfast this morning to take a walk, and now my stomach is growling in hunger.
Colby then says,
Oh, perfect timing to bring that up, Leon!
And Lion rebuttals,
Do you want me to make it the perfect time to knock you upside your head?
After their war of words, Alexa says,
Not now, guys!
Pit then proclaims,
Now it's time for Edenite cuisine! I wish I had something to season you four with!
But he is interrupted by a blast from Jackson's Beast Blaster. Jackson proclaims,
It's time we shut that appetite of yours once and for all.
Jackson then walks over to them and says,
Mrs. Hernandez is going to be fine.
And exclaims,
Now, let's make him pay for what he did to her, guys.
All five pull out the digital prisms and press the button with the morphing icon on it and exclaim,
Digital prism! Digitize!
The five then go into a morphing sequence and the prisms form around them along with grid lines and crystallize into Power Rangers suits. Jackson then says,
It's time to bring out the big guns.
And activates Rhino mode. Back at the base, Sadie walks up to Maxwell and says, It doesn't look good, Maxwell. His vital organs are failing. Maxwell replies,
I'm going to go speak to him.
Sadie then says, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Max. I tried my hardest, but his body is past the point where I can do anything that would help him anymore. Maxwell then says,
You don't have to tell me anymore, Sadie. I understand. I'm not worried about me. I'm more worried about Jackson. I hope that he will be able to handle this well.
Sadie rebuttals, Well, if you're the good father I know you are, you'll be there for him. Maxwell, reassured, says,
Sadie, you know I will.
And walks towards Apollo. Maxwell says as his eyes tear up,
Apollo, it doesn't look like you're gonna make it, buddy.
Apollo mutters,
Hold your tears. I know I won't, but I want Jackson to keep using my powers. I want you guys to keep fighting, no matter what. I spent all this time in this world worried about this fate, but at least I can say I went out helping others rather than thinking about myself.
Apollo then lets out a fatal cough and says,
I thank you all for the help that you've offered me, but my time has come.
Apollo continues and adds,
And one last thing. The Rhino Zord has called on to me, and I instructed it to help the Rangers.
Apollo then closes his eyes for the last time and Maxwell replies,
You did good, Apollo. You put aside your vendetta against humans to help us out in the end.
Grace then walks in and says,
Judging by the look on your face, he didn't make it?
Maxwell then retorts,
Yeah, he didn't. I was just starting to feel a real connection to him. Would it be weird to say it feels like losing a family member, Grace?
Grace then rebuttals,
He lost his way. Jackson helped him find it. I'm sad too that he won't be able to keep going down that path.
Maxwell nods his head and replies,
I know this will hurt Jackson, but at the same time, I know he'll use this as a fire to motivate himself.
Downtown, Jackson and the Rangers take out the Pixels. After the Rangers take out the Pixels, Colby, Alexa, Becky, and Lion activate Beast Mode. After that, they then turn their attention to Pit and began to attack him. As Colby, Alexa, Becky, and Lion are fighting Pit, he gets enraged and throws beans from his hands. As Pit is falling in the air, Jackson flies over him and hits Pit with some brutal right and left hooks while he's in the air. Jackson then catches him as he falls and throws him down to the ground viciously. Jackson then summons the Rhino Saw and rebuttals,
You won't be needing those hands anymore after this.
He then takes the saw and saws both of Pitt's hands off. Afterwards, Pitt then screams in pain and exclaims,
I'll make you suffer 1,000 deaths for that!
Lion says,
Look at him trying to reach for things with no hands.
And Colby asks,
Can you just help out in the battle and shut up?
Alexa then says,
How about both of you help and shut up?
Jackson says,
I bet you won't be eating another damn thing.
And knocks him across the ground. Lion then asks,
How are we going to get our weapons back, brother?
And Jackson replies,
I got an idea.
And looks at his stomach and exclaims,
Aha, that's it.
As Pitt is getting up, Jackson runs towards him and Pitt heaves up the weapons and says,
That was my lunch!
And Jackson replies,
You won't be making it to another dinner.
Jackson then says,
Let's give him a double finisher.
Lion, puzzled, says,
Double finisher?
Jackson then gives Alexa his sparrow saber and says,
You know what to do.
Alexa replies.
Of course.
The other 4 Rangers form the Beast Bazooka while Jackson revs up his Rhino saw. Lion asks,
Do I get to pull the trigger this time?
Alexa then sighs and answers.
Go ahead.
Colby then says,
You always let him have his way.
Alexa replies.
Focus on the task at hand.
Jackson then jumps in the air and says,
Rhino wedge!
And slices Pitt's stomach jewel up. As the jewel breaks, the people and buildings that were inside of it return to the city. Pitt saddened says,
I lost my meals!
The other 4 Rangers shout,
Beast Bazooka! Dynamic finish!
And Lion pulls the trigger and the blasts fly towards Pitt. As he is being disintegrated, he says,
It looks like that was my last meal!
Back on the Chaos Squadron, Shipreaser angrily shouts,
Zila, give him a reset.
And she then presses a button on the ship. A giant cartridge then appears in the city and turns into a giant form of Pitt. Pitt says,
My body is reopened and it won't ever be closed again!
Alexa then looks up and hears something stumping hard on the ground. Jackson asks,
What could that be?
Lion answers,
It's the Rhino Zord.
Colby then says,
About time it showed up.
And Becky adds.
Look, it's staring at you, Jackson.
Jackson then asks,
Rhino Zord, what do you want?
The Zord then transports Jackson into its cockpit. Jackson then sees a chair appear and a silver and black rectangular video game controller appears and he says,
Cool, this Zord has its own controller. Reminds me of the console that Dad's parents played back in the 80s.
Pitt exclaims,
I'm going to knock you down and have the nearest building for a meal!
And Jackson rebuttals,
Try me.
And exclaims,
Rhino Stampede!
The Rhino Zord then goes through Pitt's torso with its horn swiftly. Pitt then stumbles back and asks,
What happened so quickly?
Jackson replies,
You won't be needing your hands again.
He then presses a button on the controller in the Zord and the Rhino launches 2 horns towards both of his hands. The horns then jam themselves inside the mouths of Pitt's hands. Meanwhile, while the other Rangers are forming the digital beasts, Megazord Maxwell says over the speakers in their helmets,
Guys, combine your powers. Fuse the Rhino Sword with the Megazord for the Rhino formation.
All 5 of the Rangers then press the controllers and the digital beasts Megazord and Rhino Zord fuse together into a new Megazord with a horn on top of its head. A grappling gun then appears in the Zord's hands. Afterwards, a grappling gun with a hook in the middle of it descends in the Megazord's hands. All 5 of the Rangers then pilot the Zord to use its grapple hook. Pitt rebuttals,
Not today, Rangers!
And grabs the hook with his arms and throws the gun out of the Megazord's hands. Jackson mutters,
I prefer hand-to-hand combat anyways.
Following that, Jackson calls on the Gazelle Zord and it wraps around the Megazord's hand and forms a gauntlet around it. The Megazord then hits Pitt with a flurry of punch combinations from the left to right. Colby then says,
Let's put him out of his misery.
The Rangers then all press a button on their controllers and say,
Gazelle Gauntlet! Dynamic strike!
The Megazord then hits Pit with a barrage of punches and then hits his body with a hard uppercut. Pit exclaims,
At least I got a few good meals.
and falls to the ground and explodes. Jackson then says,
And that's another level cleared.
Back at the base, the Rangers return and Maxwell looks at them with a sad look and says,
Guys, I'm sorry. I hate to tell you this, but Apollo didn't make it.
Jackson then breaks down crying while Becky, Colby, Lion, and Alexa put their heads down. Jackson then punches a wall and replies,
Dad, he was just starting to like it here.
Maxwell puts his hand on Jackson's shoulders and says,
Son, I think this is the best time to tell you this, if any. When you're doing things like this, sometimes you'll lose people, but you can't let it get you down. You have to keep fighting no matter what. Don't let it get you down. Use it as motivation to be the best that you can be.
Jackson, with tears rolling down his face, exclaims,
Dad, I won't stop. I'll carry on his legacy no matter what.
Maxwell rebuttals,
Yeah, son. I'm sure he's smiling looking down on us right along with your mother.
Grace then joins in and says,
Jackson, think about how you got him to change his whole view on humans in one day. I'd say that he may have died, but at least he realized his faults before he did.
Jackson then mutters as he is wiping his tears away.
You're right. At least I left the impact on him.
Furthermore, Lion surveys the situation and exclaims,
I know what will help lighten the mood up. Let's have a beast finale for Apollo.
Jackson then asks,
What's that?
And Alexa answers,
Basically, we light a campfire and celebrate his life.
Jackson replies,
But I didn't get to know him.
Becky then says,
We knew him, though. We'll help you wherever we can. I promise it would be what he wanted, Jax.
And Colby rebuttals,
I'm not too big on the celebration part, but I'll do it just this once, since Jax has never experienced it before.
Lion exclaims,
Come on, guys. Let's get started.
And Maxwell asks,
Am I invited?
Lion answers,
Of course. You created this. And you could bring Grace along with you if you want.
Grace rebuttals.
I don't know about this. It doesn't seem like something I'd be into.
Lion rebuttals,
If Colby could put aside his attitude and participate, so can you.
Grace rebuttals,
You have a point.
and looks at Maxwell with a confused expression as he programmed this idea into the game. Maxwell replies,
What? I thought it was a cool idea.
Lion then exclaims,
Everyone, come on. Let's start the fire and celebrate.
and all 5 of the Rangers, Maxwell, and Grace then dress up and dance around a campfire as they celebrate Apollo's life. Grace then says,
This is better than I thought it would be.
and Lion retorts.
It only gets better.
Colby then says,
This was supposed to end an hour ago.
Lion then says,
We will celebrate until the morning Apollo's legacy was worth more than 3 hours.
and Maxwell replies.
That's right, Lion.
Becky then asks,
Are you going to be okay, Jackson?
and Jackson, with a smile on his face, answers.
Yeah,